Hello dear students, and welcome to another session on appreciating poetry. Today we will begin a new poem by Dylan Thomas, and the poem is "Do Not Go Gentle into That Good Night." Before we move on to the poem, let's have a quick look into the biography of the poet and also the time in which he lived. It was a time of the 1930s, and this period that we had discussed that in Auden's in memory of W.B. Yeats too. This period was a period of change, both in terms of socio-economic political condition of Europe as well as the intellectual sphere of Europe. There was a lot of change in the previous forms of writing. Literature itself took a different turn. The political and argumentative poetry of the 1930s was followed by a new phase in modern poetry. And very soon, with the coming of the world wars, this argumentative and conversational style of poetry lost its relevance, and it was a period of loneliness. It was a period of uncertainty. It was a period of danger, and poetry, therefore, the poetry of this period, therefore, turned to solitary themes. The 1940s poetry was introspective, private, and lyrical. This phase is often referred to as the wartime romanticism, or in fact we can even call this Dylan Thomas period, because Dylan Thomas was the outstanding poet or spokesman of this period, or this generation. Dylan Thomas was born on 27th October 1914 in Swansea. He was an Irish poet. He was a Welsh poet. I wouldn't call him an Irish poet. He was born in Wales. Extremely sorry. He's a Welsh poet. In fact, he is one of the puzzling poets the world has seen. And not just that, even his name bears an enormous number of legends, and his private life is also quite puzzling. After leaving school, Dylan joined the staff of South Wales Daily Post as a reporter, and during the Second World War, he became a script writer and a broadcaster for BBC. Well, he tried to take part in the army, but finding that his medical condition was unfit, he was rejected, and he soon, after that, he joined the BBC as a scriptwriter and a broadcaster. Now, he is very famous for the rendering of poems on the radio, and also his gramophone records. It charmed the audience. He had a very nice or beautiful voice, a very strong, passionate voice. I would want you to listen to Dylan Thomas recite this poem, his own poem, "Do Not Go Gentle into the Good Night." I would like you to listen to that, because I have already given that link in the description box below. I just want you to click onto that link and for a minute pause the video and go to that link, listen to that poem, and then we shall continue. Okay, so I want you to pause here for a moment because you need to listen to his voice to see if I am telling you the right thing, right? So just go pause the video for a minute and go to this link that I have provided. Listen to the poem that is recited by Dylan Thomas himself, and then come back and join or continue the video. All right, pause for a minute. During this time, he became well known as a bohemian personality. Now, what is a bohemian personality? A bohemian personality is one who cares less for the about himself, for the society. He lives a free life. Now, he drank too much. He had drinking problem, and in fact, his death also is due to this drinking problem. And his outrageous witticism. His poems are very intellectual, very witty in the sense very intellectual, touches the intellect, and sometimes his poems are very difficult to interpret. There are certain instances where several critics have asked him about the style in which he writes, and he would give an answer stating that if had I known myself what I wrote, then I would have been able to write it more clearly. That's the interpretation that that is the remark that he gave to several critics. At certain times, his poems are too beyond the box to give a clear-cut understanding of what he actually meant. Okay, so that's why we call him a very puzzling poet. During this time, he became a well-known bohemian personality. Now, what is who's a bohemian? A bohemian is a person who is who lives in an unconventional, who is less concerned of the societal rules and regulations. Mostly in an artistic way. An artist is mostly or lives a life mostly in an unconventional way. He or she does not completely follow the rules and regulations of or rules and regulations of the society, the set standard the society has given. So he was a bohemian personality, and also he had drinking problems. He drank too much, and also sometimes his outrageous witticism shocked the audience. He was a very puzzling kind of a poet. His poems are quite difficult to understand because there are certain times when it lacks clarity, and certain times when you find the syntax totally puzzling and also confusing at times. So his poems are in fact quite difficult to understand, most of his poems, that is. Now, in 1937, he married Caitlin Menamara, the niece of Augustus John, the painter, and he went to live in the very famous picturesque seaside town of Larne. It is pronounced Larne, though the spelling is this, it is pronounced Larne. Larne is a place in Wales, okay, south of Wales. It's a beautiful, very beautiful place. In fact, you will also find Dylan Thomas statue there. The very famous statue of Dylan Thomas is erected there in Larne. Okay. And he bought a farm there, and he spent his days there. And he had also spent his days as a child in this area of Larne. So after his marriage, he decides to settle in Larne in south of Wales. This was the place where his very, very famous his poem After the Funeral and Fern Hill were written. Dylan's visit to America, he visited America 3 times, and his visit to America stand as a testimony to his popularity among the American audience. And the American audience were in fact spellbound by his poetry, and it inspired a lot of poets, American poets as well. It was during his 3rd visit to America that he died in New York on November 9th, 1953, and his body was flown back to Wales and is buried in St. Martin's Churchyard in Lawn. According to John Wayne, a very famous critic, the poetry of Dylan Thomas did not argue, but it sang, it declaimed and thundered. It concerned itself with the bedrock facts of existence, of birth, death, and reproduction. Thus, kind of solitary musing is associated with the romantic rather than classical poetry, and hence this poetry is called neo-romantic poetry. It is also called apocalyptic verse because it is brooded on the ultimate facts and mysteries of existence. Dylan Thomas seemed to believe that against the horror, confusion, and ruin caused by the war, there was only one defense: the creative art. His poems are loaded with unique metaphors and images, and he was greatly influenced by Sigmund Freud. In fact, most of the 1930s poets were influenced by Sigmund Freud. He studied more about dreams from Freud, and he made use of what he learned by using in the form of images and syntax, that is word order, and themes in his poems. According to Freud, Freud interprets dream as a series of images apparently unconnected and contradictory, but arising from a hidden material that yields a clear meaning. Applying this theory of in poetic composition, Dylan creates artificial dreams in his writings. His central obsession was identity of birth, love, and death. He believed that the womb was a kind of tomb. I really like this philosophy of his. The womb is like a kind of tomb, and that the embryo begins to die the moment it is conceived. Correct, no? If you look at it, it is in fact very true. Every day as we move on, we were all embryos, and then we became a child, an infant, grown up, right? Every day, every breath we take, we are moving forward or towards death, towards our finality or ultimate end, right? So a womb is a kind of tomb where an embryo, the moment an embryo is conceived, it begins to die. Religion too has a very important place in his poems. He believes that a beneficent power, an ultimate power, controls the universe, and this pervades in all of his poems. You can see that in most of his poems. Dylan established himself as a writer when he was just 21. His poems "And Death Shall Have No Dominion," published in the English Weekly in 18th May 1934, is believed to be his first work, His first book, 18 Poems, published in 1932. I want you to go through your textbook, because most of the questions will be asked from your textbook, and everything is given to you in detail in your textbook. All right. So take a moment to go through your textbook. You can do that after the class. Now, do not go gentle into that good night is one of the most famous poems, and it is known by its first line. The poetic genre or the poetic form is villanelle. Now, villanelle is a French, it's actually an Italian, is of Italian origin. And what is villanelle? So, it is derived from the Italian word villano, which means rural or rustic or peasant, the countryside, the village, rustic side. Okay. A villanelle is a highly structured poem made of 5 tercets. Now, what are tercets? Tercets means 3 lines. Quatrain means 4 lines. You have studied quatrains in sonnet 29 as well as sonnet 18. Quatrains are 4 lines. Tercets are 3 lines. So, in a villanelle, you will have 5 tercets, meaning 3 each stanza contains 3 lines, and that too 5 tercets. Like that, you will have 5 of them totally, and then you will have 1 quatrain. Okay, so you will have 5 tercets followed by 1 quatrain. Quatrain means 4 lines, and in this quatrain you will have a refrain, 2 repeating rhymes and refrains. Okay, refrains means that last 2 lines they are, it is repeated in all the stanzas. That line is repeated in all the tercets or in all the stanza. That will be used in the, like a chorus. It's like a chorus in a song. Now, I'll explain the structure when we come to the poem. When we explain stanza wise, when we go stanza wise, I'll explain the structure clearly. The word villanelle is derived from, as I told you, Italian word, and the French poets, it was the French poets who used this term or popularized this term, and they called their poems villanelle, which however did not have any kind of such what we said right now, the structure, 5 tercets and a quatrain with a refrain, or nothing of that sort. They did not follow the structure. They didn't have any specific rhyme scheme or refrain as we discussed right now. Rather, this title villanelle meant for them, it meant that like it was somewhat similar to the Italian and Spanish dance songs, and their poems most often, the French villanelle normally spoke about the pastoral village areas, the rustic themes, the village areas. And a very famous poet of a French poet, Jean Passerat, he is generally credited with defining the specific characteristics of villanelle. It has become increasingly popular among the poets today. It has been widely used by Oscar Wilde. It has also been used a lot by W.H. Auden. Okay, now we'll move on to the poem. First and foremost, let's analyze the form of the poem. I have already mentioned this. It is a villanelle, and villanelle has 19 lines. I have numbered it for you for your convenience. I have already numbered it. If you look, you will be able to find that each line I have put a number. There you go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So totally a villanelle has 19 lines. It has 5 stanzas with 3 lines. See how many stanzas? 1, 2, 3, sorry, 4, 5. 5 stanzas with 3 lines, and finally you will have the 6th stanza with 4 lines. Okay, you have a 6th stanza with 4 lines, and you will find a refrain here. Refrain is like a chorus in a song. Now see, do not go gentle into that night is repeated here. It is repeated everywhere. You find the repetition, do not go gentle into that night, in each alternate lines. You will find rage, rage against the dying of the light, again repeated. They are repeated alternately, and in the final stanza you find that they are both used in the final stanza, and this makes a refrain of the poem. So villanelle has 19 lines. Okay, it has 5 stanzas with 3 lines, and 3 lines, a line stanza is known as tercet, and you have a final stanza with 4 lines which is quatrain, and you have a refrain. Okay, I hope it is clear. So shall we move on now for the rhyme scheme? Now if you look at the rhyme scheme of the poem, um, you will find the rhyme scheme here. Good night, it is A, okay, and then day is B, okay, and again you have light, so a repetition of A, so A, B, A. Let's look at the next one. Next stanza. Again, the next stanza also has the same rhyme scheme. So that is right, right, night, right, light. So it is A again. Light, no, lightning day. Now that's because I don't have space here. That's the reason why I have used they have, it has come down. So they here, day and they, it rhymes, right? So it is B. Do not go gentle into that good night. So right and night, again A. Okay, oops, can you see? Okay, now again bright, A, bay, sorry, B, oops, B, light, it is A, then again flight, A, way, B, night, A. So if you look at it, you will find that it is repeated A, B, A, A, B, A, A, B, A, A, B, A. Again, building site, it is A, gay is B, light is A. Now when you come to the final stanza, there's a slight change. Here you have height, which is again A, I pray is B, okay. Night is A, light is A. So you have A, A, B, sorry, A, B, A, 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 and the final stanza you will have A, B, A, A. So this is the rhyme scheme of the poem. Okay. And the two lines that we call refrain here, the two lines that we call refrain, are repeated 4 times each in the poem. See, rage 1, 2, 3, 4. And likewise, you have do not go gentle into that good night is again repeated 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So these two lines, which we call refrain, are repeated 4 times, like a chorus of the song. And you will also notice that they are repeated alternatively in the stanzas. They are repeated alternatively. See, in the beginning, he has used both. In the next few lines, in the next few stanzas, they are repeated alternatively. See, do not go gentle to that good night. And next you have rage, rage against the dying of the light. Then again, do not go gentle to that good night. Then rage, rage against the dying of the light. And finally, you have them both together as a refrain. Okay. And so when you read the poem, I also want you to think about the order. Light, night, light, night. See the repetition of that order. You will find light, night, light, night, light. And then again you have the night and then light. So there is a repetition of this order. As you read, you will have to think about this. If the poem is about death and it ends on light, why would that be? See, the poem is about death, the death of Dylan Thomas's father. Okay, so if the poem is about death, then why is it that the poem ends? Look at the last line, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Why do you think that last line ends with light? Now, this is a question I would like to pose, I would like to ask you. I want you to think about it and tell me. Okay? As you read, you will also notice that Thomas changes the ends of words to make them sound hard, not soft. Now look at that first one. Do not go gentle into that good night. Don't you think it could have been do not go gently into that good night? Normally we use the word gently. Gentle is more harsh. No, gently is more sounds more soft. So why do you think he has used that word? Do not go gentle into that night. And so it doesn't fit there. Something, it makes it very harsh. Connect it with the theme and see why. When he's asking us to, or don't you think he's asking us to fight this thing called death? Maybe that is the reason as to why he has purposefully chosen the word gentle instead of gently. Gently is more soft, as though you are, you are meekly allowing death to conquer you. That's not what the poem is about. The poem is asking you to fight, resist, and fight against death. We all know that death is inevitable. We will have to die one day. As long as we are born, we have to die. We have to face that day. But he's saying, do not be so gentle. Do not be so meek that you would just face it. Okay, take me. Not that. Instead, fight. Fight till the very end of your breath. To the last drop of your sweat. To the end of the breath. Last breath of yours. Fight. Fight death.
even though you know that it is inevitable. Fight like a soldier. So that is the reason why he has chosen the words soft. Sorry, he has chosen the word gentle and not gently. Gently becomes very soft. He doesn't want you to be soft. He wants you to be a warrior and fight. Okay. So much for the structure of the poem. Let's move on to the poem as such. All right. But before we move on, I would like to tell you that this poem was written when his father was, when he knew that his father was suffering from cancer. His father was battling cancer. Dylan was very attached to his father, and he knows that it is inevitable, death is inevitable, and the vacuum that a person leaves after his death is traumatizing. But one has to get over that. The ones who are living will have to get over it. And not just that, this poem is about not for the ones who are living, but for the ones who are fighting death. Those are fighting death, especially the old age, at old age, when you're fighting death at old age, not the death as of death because of old age. Death here is uh, the unexpected troubled death or problematic death like cancer and all. When your body is, you are, when you are even physically and mentally you're weak. Death, old age is a time when you're physically weak. So here he says it's like a motivation to others who are suffering from such problems. He's saying, we know that we will die, but we mustn't let death conquer us just as it is. We must fight like a soldier. We must fight death till the end of our breath. We must fight death. We may not be able to conquer it, but we have to fight it like a soldier. So, this is the background of the poem. Let's move on to the first stanza of the poem. Um, Again, before we move on, I want you to think of what connotations are of light and day and dark and night. Now, before we move on to the poem, the first stanza of the poem, I want you to think of what connotations are of light and day and dark and night. And on a mind map, think about how a poet would use them symbolically to suggest, something else. All right. Often, light and day are considered to be symbols or metaphors of life, the living, hope, and night and dark are often used symbolically or metaphorically to connotate death, ending, and finality. Now, I want you to bear these ideas in mind before we begin the poem. Okay? Death is an inevitable thing. We all know that. This poem is trying to ask you what kind of person you are. It's questioning you. What type of person are you? Are you a fighter or do you give up easily? Are you the type of person who wants the absolute best no matter what and you try your hardest? And if you are such a person, a fighter who'd go on, then Dylan Thomas's poem or his poems are for you, especially this poem. It is beautiful, it is inspirational, and incredibly powerful. Thomas challenges the notion of dying gracefully. He encourages us also, and also his father, to whom the poem is being addressed to rage against death as strongly as possible. So let's begin. I'll read the poem for you. I also like you to read it 2 or 3 times for a better understanding. The more you read, the better and more clear the poem becomes. Usually poems are meant to be heard. They're meant to be listened to. As I told you, I hope you had paused and listened to Dylan Thomas himself, the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas himself reciting this poem. And I want you all to read it, listen to the poet, listen to the poem, and I want you also to read it loudly. Do not go gentle into that good night. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on that sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So this is the poem. I want you to read it twice or thrice, and then we'll move on to the first stanza of the poem. So till then, thank you and keep safe.